Hello, everyone. Today is Friday, the 18th of August. My name is Chris Ellis, and this is Block Digest. Welcome to our fourth episode. And today we're going to be talking about BitPay and the potential fork that is happening. Before we do, I will announce the latest block height. It is block height 481,136. And I just go straight into it. And we've got a special guest with us today. We've got Olivier Janssens with us, who's just made a tweet and has talked about this issue. But earlier on today on Reddit, it was announced that the BitPay API will be forked. Not the market-making facilities that they offer, but the actual API itself. And so people are sort of putting stuff on our Bitcoin, you know how it goes with all the trolling, like BitPay, you're fired, and all that kind of hyperbole. But here on the show, we try to be as objective as possible. The fork I think, was instigated by this guy, Nicolas Dorier. Unless anyone can prove me wrong, I went through all the history of it, and he seemed to be the first person to do it. And Inline Producer, Mr. Hoddle, furnished us with some screen caps of the Slack channel. And basically, he's making clear here that he's going to replicate the API that would allow anybody else to use it. This comes off the back of yesterday's news, as we reported it to you, that BitPay will be putting in BTC1 as their main implementation. I don't think they made too much mention of the controversy behind it. I think they just kind of expected users to upgrade without really thinking about it. And in response to that, some users are deciding that they want to fork BitPay altogether. It was made clear, though, in this conversation, which I'll make available in the show notes later on, that there will be no market-making facilities to be done with this. It will just literally give merchants the ability to, I think they were talking about using the mycelium gear, if I'm correct. So mycelium gear is just a basic API you can put into your website. You give the mycelium gear website an HD wallet, and then every time somebody goes to your site, your shop, to buy something, it just generates a new public key per customer. You don't actually get any of the fiat out of that, but what you do get is the Bitcoin for you to sell on Kraken, or you can sell on an exchange in a kind of an automatic fashion. So I'll go to I guess Olivier, what was your thoughts? I mean, you jumped on, you saw this tweet, you joined us here. Let's see what you think.
Well, I think it's sort of in line with what's happening. I think people are starting to object, the 1 megabyte people, I will call them. And this is the way to protest. I think at this point, it's very clear that most of the miners, most of the companies are behind the whole SegWit 2x proposal. And I think it would be counterproductive for Bitcoin to keep fighting it. And I think it's going to be very bad for Bitcoin's reputation if the next 3 months are going to be very, very hard, So I think it's better that everyone just accepts what's going to happen. If they still want to split off November, December, that's fine. And they can, just like Bitcoin Cash. But I think it's bad to take Bitcoin with them or try to blow it up.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, I think that comes into play like a big fundamental difference in this space, which is what actually defines Bitcoin. And I know, Olivier, you might say that it's the miners, but I think it's a lot more of a gray area. And to kind of tie in with what's going on in BitPay with their API and Bitcore being forked, I think this kind of clearly demonstrates it. Like most of their business was just open source infrastructure and the API to plug in. And really, that's all, like anybody can take that and plug it into something else. So when you really break it down, the core of their business was just the liquidity pool that they offered. And I mean, to kind of move beyond BitPay a little bit, like what other businesses in this space are in this kind of situation? Because ultimately, any business heavily dependent on just this open source infrastructure that at the end of the day just plugs into a liquidity pool is kind of open to this same kind of risk, that if the market, the user base doesn't like what they're doing, they just need to take all the infrastructure and plug it into another liquidity pool. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's that pool of liquidity. It's those consumers demanding Bitcoin that gives it value, that gives it that network effect. And I don't think it's really as black and white as like the miners define Bitcoin, or even just the exchanges define Bitcoin, because these liquidity pools are all resulting from all these disparate users and traders like just plugging into it. And if they unplug and go somewhere else,
let's Olivier respond to that.
Well, I don't hijack the whole conference, so you guys can also, I mean, don't just rely on me for my answers, but I still have to come back to the same point, right? This really drills down to the core subject of what's going to be the next Bitcoin. Is it going to be Bitcoin 2x, right? Or is it going to be Bitcoin 1 megabyte? And that's where the fight is taking place today. It's all about that. Who will carry on the name of Bitcoin? And to me, it's clear that there was an agreement. The miners are gonna put most of their hashing power behind 2x, and most of the companies are gonna do the same. So I think the more we fight is, the worse it will get for Bitcoin. So I just have to reiterate that point. I know the liquidity pool will follow that. So,
well, it's going to be a moving landscape, and it was the same when we were talking at Bitfinex about whether to do some kind of futures contract for the UASF, the BIP 148, and that chain split. The problem was that there was so much changing, both technologically and socially, with different people coming out with different proposals, that it was very, very difficult for us to give any kind of stability or any kind of like certainty on the outcome, to the point where you could buy this thing right now, but then actually, as it turned out, there was BIP 91, and a lot of miners ended up installing that. And ultimately, what I witnessed from my perspective was it was the users that decided, like, they'll install the code that they want to install, and if they see something that they don't like, yes, I mean, what you end up with is a game theory, or a sort of a Keynesian beauty contest, I guess, where everyone's looking at everyone else to see what they're going to do, and you will freeze for a moment, and it turns into this kind of temporal phenomena where, well, obviously the miners need to sell their coins. In order to do that, they need exchanges. In order to do that, those exchanges need liquidity. There needs to be buying pressure. There needs to be a low stable price for the buyers and a high stable price for the sellers. And you only get that when all those pieces. So I find that this notion that the miners are the ones that determine it, or conversely, the other polar opposite, which is only the users, I think, shouldn't we just see all of these as stakeholders with relative strengths of control based on socio and economic input?
No, it's a great question. I think it's more than just the miners, of course. If the miners do something completely crazy tomorrow, no one will follow them. So it's a combination, but I think we had the same happening with Bitcoin Classic, that we have most of the miners and community supporting it, but then most of the Blockstream guys flew through Hong Kong, had them sign under agreements. And I'm going to go into the whole thing again, but what happened was that, okay, it got postponed, and we got all the disasters happening with Bitcoin in the meantime, with whole blocks being full, transactions being backlogged, and some people might like that. I know a couple of people who really do that like that. I think it's insane to like that. But anyway, just getting back to this point is that I think it's very important that we recognize that most of the miners and most of the companies are supporting the agreements. And I think also a big part of the community is, and of course there's like a very vocal part right now. Some of the people are here that protest against that. But I think it's going to be very counterproductive. And I think it's also risky that they will make such a big fuss about it, that is going to be very detrimental for Bitcoin as a whole, and we risk of destroying Bitcoin's reputation. We already have a large amount of competition now with Ethereum. So, I mean, I welcome all competition. In the end, I'm also very happy about, I mean, in some way, I'm happy about having three choices in the end, right? Like three forks and people having the ultimate choice. But, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. That's what I'm saying. Just be careful not to take it too far, that like we will have a bad reputation, we'll have so much infighting, like people burning their BitPay cards. That's bad press. We have other fights to do. And I think, I know it really matters for people that they can keep the 1 megabyte limit. It also matters for me that we don't have the limit, but I'm just sending a cautionary note that I think the fight is already pretty much over today from what I see. And I think it's just better to go along with it.
Theo, do you have a perspective on this?
Yeah, I don't think. Well, I think today, or we're discussing about the whole BitPay thing. We have a example of something that is dangerous. Is that not clearly informing people the risks that they're taking by downloading the stuff that BitPay told them to download? Because a lot of those users are not, those companies and so on. Your average person with a WordPress site and WooCommerce plugin, maybe they're not some mega economic node or whatever, but they're not going to understand all that, what to do. They'll just do what BitPay says, and they're not informing well enough about the risks of what's going on if they choose to do that. So I think that is something that's an example of something that will give Bitcoin a bad reputation. And I don't think that we should say everyone should just stop discussing everything and let's just not everybody hold hands and we're all kumbaya now. We have to discuss things. So I don't think it's the right message to say, don't cause so much trouble, everybody. We should just, discuss. Sure, we should discuss maybe like this more or in person. But I don't think that that's the right way to go, to say, let's not rock the boat, guys, because we're going to sink. Then I don't think that's the way to do it. We need to discuss this out.
It's going to rock the boat, whatever.
I'm rocking the boat.
No. I mean, it's going to rock whatever happens. Like, I guess you could.
It is going to rock the boat, whatever happens. And
hyperbole. And yeah, the problem is the incentive structures. I witnessed it for myself working inside of an exchange, and also as somebody who's like, a journalist in the space and reporting on it. I see the incentives. I saw it with Bitcoin Cash. I saw it with all these exchanges that had this unexpected engineering overhead that was plundered onto them, and then suddenly, like, all hands on deck. They have to stop what they're doing. They have to implement this because a large volume of customers are going to start demanding these Bcash tokens, right? And then they have to wonder, well, how are we going to recover this? And then the incentive is to add it. And then when the incentive is to add it, because of course, particularly if you're doing margin lending with all of these chain splits, just briefly to go over it with you, is that you have to be able to either provide a liquidity pool yourself, or alternatively, you have to go outside of the exchange to get the Bcash for all the people that were margin short, right? Because if you were shorting Bitcoin at the time, or even if you were longing Ethereum BTC, which is effectively shorting Bitcoin, you now have to come up with all of these extra tokens in the case of Bcash, and the exchange has to get those from somewhere. And so there's an incentive then to say, well, rather than us sort of taking this wild risk and going off to some other exchange and getting off there, I guess we may as well just have our own liquidity pool. Well, if we have our own liquidity pool, then we've listed it. And if we've listed it, you now start to see what we're seeing happen with Ethereum Classic and with Bitcoin Cash, which is where the price goes down for a long time. There's a lot of selling and people just think, hey, free money, and everyone's in profit. And it's just house money that they're playing with. And then eventually it usually finds a low stable price. It finds that bottom, and then it starts to rally because so many people are vested into it, and it just becomes another altcoin. But I think it's right to say that I don't think we should, aggravate the tensions in the community. But I think we're lying to ourselves if we don't think that there's going to be a lot of commotion around this, whatever we do.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not saying you should become silent, right? You should always stand for your opinion. I certainly do. I've always done that. Always spoken the truth. Are you still there? Because I think, Chris, you broke up.
Yeah, we hear you. We hear you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
All good.
So yeah, of course, you need to keep debating. Completely fine, even to some extent where you don't go to war, but you have very firm opinions. I think it's very healthy to have these debates. But I think we're now at the point where we had them for a long time now, for years. People agreed, or most of them at least. I'm just worried that a small vocal minority will sort of destroy what's left. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of research has gone into the science of scaling. There hasn't been a whole lot of research into the study of peace and negotiation and how to disagree in a manner that is respectful. And I guess that's what we're trying to achieve on this channel here. So do we have any other views on this? I mean, we can talk a little bit about the replay protection. Olivier, you did tweet about that, and you said basically that it's up to core to put in those protections. Is that right? Like
yeah, it's also a very simple point. I think there will be many, hopefully, hard forks in the future, because it's a normal way to upgrade the Bitcoin system, right? So it's completely fine. I think just some group with political influence and political preference has made hard forks the evil incarnate, and I think that's very bad for Bitcoin, because now we have to do everything through soft forks, which isn't always ideal, such as we have seen with Segwit. I think it could have been done in a much nicer way, but I'm not going to go into that topic. But anyway, I think hard forks are a very normal process to upgrade Bitcoin. And I think every time we do a hard fork, we don't have to add replay protection for the guys who don't agree with that, because that's just absurd to do that. So I think we should just upgrade Bitcoin through hard forks, soft forks, whatever is necessary, and we don't build in the replay protection. If someone really feels that inclined that they're not going to join, they should, hard fork themselves, add replay protection, and make their own coin, like Bitcoin Cash did. I think that was completely fair what they did. I think everyone has the right to secede, so to speak, and yeah, let them move on.
Okay, I want to bring up one other point then with you, which is the list of all the businesses and so on that are not actually supporting this. Just to kind of round off this point about the fact that whatever we do, we're going to have some kind of commotion. I mean, this is quite a long list, right? Of these are the businesses that are not supporting Segwit 2x. I mean, is this right to your understanding? This is on Knob2x on the Git repo. I'm not sure if you saw it.
I don't know anything about the accuracy of that list, but I know the bigger players are on board with most of it. So, yeah.
What about the Bitstamp? Are they on board?
I have no idea about Bitstamp.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing though, to jump in here. Like the three biggest exchanges as far as easily consumer facing for Spot, Kraken, Bitstamp, and Bitfinex, none of them have voiced support for this. And I mean, there's a large segment of companies in the space that have, but there's also a smaller segment of larger, more important businesses that haven't. And to call back a little of what you were saying with a hard fork as an upgrade, I think that there's a little bit of a conflation there, both in people such as myself and our attitudes about hard forks and what they are, because it's more of a replacement of a protocol than an upgrade. It's not incorporating new things into the existing protocol. It's essentially replacing it in a way that it's not compatible. And I mean, me personally, I don't really have, objectively speaking, any problems with a hard fork so long as there is actually consensus for it. My skepticism for hard forks is because Bcash, the first successful one we've seen, this wasn't an upgrade. This was a breaking off into a new competing project. And this is going to have, I don't think we've seen the end of the consequences for Bitcoin proper's incentives just through this existing. And I feel without a very high degree of certainty of that consensus on a hard fork, we're risking serious systemic failure modes with our incentive structure by creating these agitating entities or bodies outside of it when something breaks off from Bitcoin. I would love to see the day when everybody is on board for a hard fork, not just for a throughput increase with a block size, but many other technical improvements we can make in the data structure format. But I just really don't think we're there. And I think the only thing I need to point to really prove that is three major exchanges like Finex, Kraken, and Bitstamp aren't supporting this 2x drive. And it just makes me nervous seeing that this could just keep happening and keep adding these exacerbating factors. The more segments of the community just want to push for a hard fork right away and not take time with it.
So you say they are not supporting it, but have they voiced objection to it? Or they coming out and firmly saying, no, we don't want it? Because there's a big difference, right? Maybe, I mean, they didn't say anything, doesn't mean they don't support it or they hate it, So did they, or?
Well, I don't know about that specific site, but if those are actually placed there by representatives of those companies, I would take that as an affirmative no. But even if those are inaccurate sources on the GitHub, I still believe that lack of an affirmative yes is enough to really think that there's big risks here. And
I don't think changes are that outspoken, because they have to serve many users which are on different political perspectives. So I think they're just playing it safe, and they're not alienating parts of their user base. So if they really have a serious objection to it, they should come out and say so. But if they don't, for me, it's the same as going along with it. If you don't say anything, it means you probably are not entirely against it, you know? So I think we'd have to ask the exchanges, and until I see them tweeting it myself or sending messages about that, then I can imagine Bitfinex will be against it, because they're, as far as I'm aware, hardcore 1 megabytes people, or a lot of them that I know, not all of them, but I know a couple. And I also didn't think the prediction market they made for like half a year ago was an honest one. I think it was a biased one, but it's a different discussion. Anyway, the other things you said about getting consensus. Yeah, you can never get 100% consensus. Where is consensus enough to do it? Who's going to decide that? I think at one point you have an agreement like the New York agreement coming up, where you have probably sufficient consensus. And even in those cases, you will still have people who say, like, I don't want it, and we're going to fork off. And that's also the beauty, I guess. If you really don't like it, you can always fork. And that's exactly what happens. And the market can decide for you. And yeah.
Don't you worry, Olivier, that it undermines the 21 million cap when we've got all of these various different Bitcoins? Because this won't be the last time, will it? It will be more of these.
I think so far people who kept both, and I did, I'm not selling any of them, are very happy today, right? It's compounding. It's worth a lot more today than it was before the fork. So I'm not complaining. I think the more choice the market gets, the better. And I'm not selling any of my coins, even if there will be a minority coin from what I can gather today for the 1 megabyte people. I'm also going to keep that one. I mean, it's fine, and I'm going to wait.
Okay. Well, I will also add that we did have a nice chat with Luke Dash Jr. or Luke Dashier, as I'm told that it's pronounced. And we have a recording of that, 7 minutes long, and we're going to be uploading after this live stream finishes. And in that video, he basically talks through, and maybe if anyone technical enough is here to elaborate on it, basically what is required for a replay protection in the event of the BTC1 fork. So, or the chain split, I should say. Essentially, what it would be is that you would have to do an N-lock time. So you would have to double spend your own coins if you wanted to go off on a minority chain, and you would have to put an N-lock on it so that you could spend it on one network, lock these coins up here on the other network, so that they couldn't be spent, wait for the confirmation to go through, and then you can spend on the other network, on the original network. So we do have a recording of them going through that. We're joined by Acnix as well. I don't know if you caught any of what we were talking about, but this is BitPay. This is the chain split that's coming up in November.
Yep.
Do you think anything?
Yeah, I wasn't able to catch much of it, and I'm getting some major lag right now. Okay. Oh no, I'm wrecked.
No, you sound fine. But do you have any thoughts maybe on like the semantical reasoning behind like which side of a chain split should be obligated to like build in replay protection and think about not disrupting the other side?
Yeah, I mean, whoever's proposing the new changes is really the person, you know, is really the side that needs to bake in the changes. The original chain, the originator probably doesn't need to do anything like that, right? But I mean, it depends on how it affects the community. So I tend to lean towards the originating side. You know, the original chain doesn't have to do anything.
Okay. Well, let's segue into what is the forks that has happened already, which is Bitcoin Cash, which is right now absolutely surging, unabated. now we're past $700, which is the actually all-time high on Bitfinex. It got to $1,200 originally on Bittrex. That was when it first came out, and now it's really kind of lunging for it. So earlier on today, there was actually a CoinDesk article by Jimmy Song, whom I'm a big fan of, and he was saying that now the Bitcoin Cash is going to be more profitable to mine. It's in the show notes down below if you're following. And I don't know if you guys make anything of this. I mean, I was, again, with the incentives. Not only did the exchanges have an incentive to list Bitcoin Cash, but also the media had an incentive to talk about it, because this was free money, right? This was like, people were calling it an airdrop. Of course, that's not, I mean, it's not like an airdrop in the sense of some of the other ones that we've seen, which take a snapshot of the blockchain. This, you know, Bitcoin Cash has the Genesis block of the Bitcoin blockchain, and it took the full UTXO set at a given time. So but it felt like free money. It felt like a dividend payment. And I almost sense that people now start buying Bitcoin just in anticipation of all these various forks. And now Jimmy Song is saying, with caveats, that it will be more profitable to mine on the Bitcoin Cash chain. This is actually a graph of fork.lol, fork lol. And you see this blue line. It's just overtaking Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's the orange one, and Bitcoin Cash is the blue one. Who wants to go first?
There's also going to be a difficulty adjustment coming up soon. Like, it's going to cut difficulty in half, so it will definitely be more profitable to mine if it keeps the current price, right?
Yeah, and that's why people are doing it. And I guess the threat really for Bitcoin is that too much hashing power goes over to Bitcoin Cash, and then the Bitcoin blockchain will start to slow down between each difficulty adjustment, because it takes approximately 2,000 blocks or so, which is a moment around 10 to 14 days of time. But if hashing power moves over to Bitcoin Cash, that hashing power will start to slow down. The time between each block will extend, and those 2,000 blocks could take longer.
It wouldn't be such a problem if there were a big block size limit, so the transactions wouldn't get extremely stuck, or the prices are going to go crazy. So yes, the problem that there's a 1 megabyte limit, which will make this problem much worse. On top of everything.
Well, we actually saw the number of Bitcoin transactions go down, though, didn't we? Like, particularly after the MYA agreement, like I was finding it very cheap to send transactions on the network. I don't know about you. And then that seemed to all dry up. I mean, what happened?
I have no idea.
Right.
Can you guys hear me?
Yay, Mr. Hollow.
I'm sorry, I had to jump in here. There's about maybe 10 to 15 SHA-256 coins that at any given time and point of day that could be more profitable to mine than Bitcoin. Bitcoin actually is never the most profitable SHA-256 coin to mine. It usually averages around 3 or 4 throughout the day. The consistency of it being there all the time, you know the reward that you're going to get. Whereas if you start throwing your miners from one SHA-256 coin to the other, by the time you're done mining it, it might not be the most profitable coin to mine already. So the metric, this has hype, this has a lot of marketing behind it. I could understand why it's being pumped right now, why it's being more profitable to mine. But as time goes on, the miners need to have a buyer. And if, you know, I just can't fathom that something like Bitcoin Cash is going to survive long term. So yeah, it's having its pump. There's plenty of other SHA-256 coins that have pumps. We don't really watch them very much because no one really cares. And people right now care about this because this is the new thing that's in town. We're not really talking about Ethereum anymore. It's all about Bitcoin Cash. And give it a year and it's just going to be another altcoin.
See, I was thinking actually just trying to compare versus ETC previous charts, you know? Because I think we may see a similar pattern, even though they're not necessarily comparable, right?
Yeah, Flibber was talking about that over on the Whale Pool team speak earlier on. He was comparing the charts and saying how similar they looked. I think this is the problem, is that when you do get something new and exciting, traders feel like they've got a new toy to play with. Everyone's looking at the announcements, and then those announcements feed into the news cycle, which feeds into the trading. And so people start buying because they think, oh, the difficulty's going down, everyone's going to jump on it. And then, of course, when you actually get the news event, often it will correct back down. But to Mr. Hoddle's point, and by the way, it's great to have you on here. I'm glad that you finally decided to come on. A lot of those SHA-256 coins, man, they have no liquidity, right? So you can't really mine at any big scale, because if you try to sell your coins, you're just going to crash the price. I mean, the problem with like coinwars.com and all those comparison websites that tell you the profitability is they don't tell you, they only give you a mark price. They don't tell you how much buy support there will be when you actually take those coins to the exchange.
Well, yeah, and another aspect of that, when you're looking at like Bcash being profitable, there's kind of two factors there. It might be profitable, but what is its relative profitability to Bitcoin? Like you might be able to turn a profit, but are you turning less of a profit than you would mining Bitcoin proper? And then also, when you have those miners pile in to start mining it because it's more profitable, you get that one difficulty period, and then unless the price follows it up, it's not profitable after that. And then they have to go through the whole game of pulling hash power, letting the dynamic downward adjustment happen a little faster, and then start again unless the price follows it the whole way up.
Yeah. What's so funny, Chris?
We've got people on this. We've got people on this call that right now on this show that have blocked each other on Twitter, and it's just good to like get everybody.
I just wanted to say that that's all right, and not only that, if you have a huge mining farm, it's not as simple as just flipping a switch to suddenly mine, a totally different coin. You know what I mean? If you have those warehouses full, you're not just going to switch over really quick to this and that coin. So otherwise you'd see altcoins totally destroyed if they have SHA-256. Imagine those warehouses just flipping over at a flip of a switch. It's not quite that simple, and it's a lot of opportunity cost, a lot of opportunity risk to switch back and forth in that if you're really huge. All right, yeah, let's address this. Who's blocked each other? You guys can make peace live on air.
Well,
this is, Bitcoin, we're making peace now.
This is what I was talking about earlier about there's very little study on the topic of peace and the negotiation, right, in conflict. Difficult Conversations is a great book. I highly recommend it, from Harvard University Press. They have a really good project there called the Harvard Peace Project, which I've been, subscribed to their newsletters since forever. And it taught me a lot, really, about difficult conversations, because when I was, running businesses for a long time, various disputes would arise, and I just got fed up, with falling out with people, and particularly like in a way that, you stop being friends. Like, it's perfectly okay for people to disagree with one another. What I find frustrating is that it starts to become personal, and you have the ad hominem attacks, and you have all the, these other various kind of personal snipings. And I find that the memes on Twitter, I think if you're just glued to your Twitter feed, that can be quite oppressive. Like, you open it up and it makes you feel a certain way, like you feel happy because lots of people liked and retweeted you. And then someone comes in and just says something really nasty and personal. And I get why people block each other. I mean, but I would rather people actually got face to face, or maybe on a call like this where you can't actually physically hit one another over the internet, like show me on this doll where the internet hurt you. It's difficult, but it's a battle of the minds, and it's a battle of, intellect. And I just want to stay focused on the data and the science, and try, and particularly as this topic is so multifaceted, it involves, knowledge of computer science and economics and, socioeconomics. So those are my thoughts. And after this, basically, I want to just recap on what we said on Trezor yesterday. But does anyone have any kind of closing thoughts around Bcash?
Oh yeah, I have to go, but I just want to thank you for organizing this, and I think it's great we can have a peaceful discussion. I very much welcome it. So
yeah, well, thanks for coming on, Olivier. We really appreciate you. You saw our tweet and you're like DMing, you're like, yeah, absolutely, anytime.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, man. Take care. All right, so following up, unless anyone has anything to add to that story, I wanted to follow up on the Trezor. Nobody, any objections?
I think onward we go.
Good. Sharneen, is there anyone, what's going on in the chat box as well? Keep an eye on that, and we'll go to that after this. So we got another follow-up from Trezor today, following the story that we covered yesterday around the alleged hack. There has been an update. Trezor claimed that they're now, every attack vector they're aware of is now protected. I will just first start off with pointing this out, which is that if you don't have an additional password on your Trezor, so the so-called 25th word, then of course you are going to be somewhat vulnerable to an attack, which is not a remote attack. It requires physical access to that Trezor. But even, if you let it out of your site, you can't keep it on you all of the time. And in order to protect yourself, you need a passphrase. And some people brought up the notion of the brute force attack. We talked about it in the chat, and I'll reiterate it here. I mean, I came to the same conclusion. Breaking the 25th word isn't like brute forcing an ordinary password, because every passphrase is valid when you enter the 25th word, which means that the hacker has to check all of the unspent outputs in that, or actually all the inputs in that HD wallet that you've created before they know that they've hit onto something. So it would take an extraordinary amount of time. That still doesn't mean that you get to make a lousy password, by the way. It still needs to be very strong. But yeah, they responded to it. They're saying that it's fixed, and it does not affect the hardware. Okay. So anyone want to come in on this?
Yeah, I think what the issue was, from what I've been reading on this, is that normally when you do a firmware upgrade, what you'll do is you'll wipe things, you'll move into the bootloader mode, and then flash everything, and then move into the new firmware. But the pictures where they showed like the connection between the two pins and the actual circuit board, I think what that did was it actually did a soft reset instead of a full power down and power up, so it didn't actually wipe the RAM. And that would allow, it keeps the old firmware in there, your HDC'd, and I believe that that's pretty much the mechanism which you could extract everything through.
Yeah, and they explain in this report, which is extremely well written and actually very fast too. I mean, in my experience in companies, it takes a long time to get these kind of releases out. Multiple people have to get involved, but they've written this really, really well. And by the way, I'm not paid by anyone at Trezor to say this. I have a Trezor, but I also have Ledger wallets and so on. So that they've explained really well how it works. They've explained that their setup with the linking between the hardware and the software was such that they had a lot of flexibility, that they could put the various variables in certain places on the hardware, and that they were able to fix it. And I certainly felt yesterday when people were kind of fudding that this was being blown out of proportion. So, but nevertheless, we always must think adversarially in information security. So it's absolutely correct that people stay on their toes. Anything else to add on this, or shall we move on to our final story of the day? No
I just
objection.
wanted to kind of say, like, real quick, just to add a little more clarity. What they did to fix this issue was essentially modify the bootloader so that it always manually wipes the RAM during a reset. So that way you can guarantee that all your information is being flushed every time it's reset, and there's no way to kind of trick it like you did with the exploit into not wiping the RAM.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, and finally, and we're going to say more about this in the coming days, Hidden Wallet and Samurai Wallet are joining forces to make Bitcoin private with ZeroLink. This is an article from Bitcoin Magazine. And also, I guess we have a contact there at Samurai Wallet, right? And is there anything coming up in the next few days,
Yes.
Shinobi?
Hopefully sometime this weekend or one of the early shows next week, we should be able to get the Samurai Wallet developer on here to go a little in depth with this.
Is he actually going to get on the mic? Is he? Because I know he's anonymous, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he'd be able to kind of do what I'm doing, just put up a funny picture, and then I guess the NSA will be able to voice print him.
We can do a voice. We can get a voice mixer, changer mixer. Kind of modulator thing to make it a little harder.
But do you want to give everyone the TLDR on this story? Basically, it's like a coin join But it's still centralized. They make that point. But the two wallets together will be able. They've created a service that allows people to mix their Bitcoins.
Yeah, this is actually, it's really interesting. It's kind of taking some of the Tumblebit model and the CoinJoin model and kind of hybridizing them. And so what you would do is have essentially two segregated wallets, one for pre-mixed coins and one for after-mixed coins. And what you'll do is you'll connect to the Tumblr server using the addresses from the premix wallet, and you'll provide it with inputs. And then what you'll do is you'll blind the outputs so that it can cryptographically sign those for a validity check, but it doesn't actually know the outputs. So at this first phase, the Tumblr has your inputs and it has the commitment to the outputs. And then what you'll do is you'll sever that connection to the Tumblr server and reconnect through something like Tor or a VPN to obscure your location, and then provide them with the unblinded outputs. So this way they can check, being from a new connection, that these are the same things everybody committed to in the first process. Mm-hmm. And then it can take those, bundle the transaction, have everybody sign it, and then broadcast it. And that way, like, everybody in the first phase commits to the inputs. So all the money is only going to go where people want it to, but the Tumblr doesn't really know whose was whose after you reconnect and then submit the unblinded input. So it kind of uses like the blinding mechanism that Tumblebit does to guarantee that it can't trace everything, but uses it to implement like a CoinJoin protocol instead of just the Tumblr that it does right now.
Great. Well, we're going to hear more about that, as I said before. And also you can look forward to, after this show ends, we're going to upload that little conversation that we had with Luke Deshire, yesterday, Bitcoin core developer. And that's also going to be fully transcribed by Janine, who's the producer as well here at Block Digest. So all of that stuff's being done. You know, you can see this is a bit of a community project. We're hoping that more people can get involved. You know, transcribing shows, putting time codes in the description, so that we can add them. And then basically when more people then come to the video, they can just jump to the parts that they're interested in. So every little helps. All contributions are welcome. And you can also join us in the Mumble chat. The link is in the description below. Any final thoughts before we close out, gentlemen?
I think this is going to be an interesting, drama-filled last period of the year.
Yeah, I agree. And I just want to, I've said it before, but it is interesting. And I don't know, humans, you know, they go with the seasons and everything. We just got through another fork or controversial season of the year, because last year you had Ethereum Classic fork, and the year before that you had Bitcoin XT at the exact same time of the year. So these kind of patterns are repeating themselves. So let's see what happens this last time of the year. And I think there's going to be a new wave of users coming in with all this news all-time high and stuff. So it'll be pretty interesting.
Great. I'm just looking at our chat here, and we've got Brock, who's thanking Olivier for coming on. You see, even though we may disagree, we still want people on here.
Yeah, so we should, and then, you know, explicitly, you know, make the invitation for anyone that totally disagrees with any of us, or people that tweet things like North Korean and stuff like that,
right,
that they can come on here and have a discussion, and, you know, we can talk about the issues. I think it's a good format, and it's way more productive than just being a big blocker on Twitter, in the sense of blocking someone. Get it? Big blocker.
Yeah, the blockchain has often been cited. And we also got Alp as well. We want Alp. We want you to join if you're watching this. We really could do with your input as well. That would be really great. But I guess that's all we got time for this today, actually, because we've been doing daily shows. We weren't really sure how frequently we were going to do them. It all sort of was based on, you know, how alert we were and synchronizing all of our schedules. So thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate all the support. This is still a young channel. You can like and subscribe, but remember, only if you want to. Bye for now.